Thank you, and thank you all for being here, and Luke and those online, thank you. And I went out to Bellefontaine. I would pronounce it Bellefontaine, but the locals call it Bellefontaine. And out at Xenia, Ohio, just a little bit south of there, maybe about an hour drive south of there, is where Luke and Billy live. And so when I went out there to visit and take pictures of the street, went out and visited Luke and Billy and had lunch with them. This would be a picture of us together in front of the restaurant where we had lunch, but I'm too dumb and I forgot. Sorry, Luke and Billy, but here we are. And I want to thank them for making the time for me when I went out there to visit and to sit down and talk to me about the oldest concrete street in America. After lunch, I went over to Bellefontaine and I took that picture, and it matches with a postcard that I purchased off of eBay from about 1900 to 1910. And I think that I found the same exact spot that the photographer was at that time. And so I wanted to put those two together and match that up. And on the other side of the street is the big sign that was, I think, erected in 1991, and the statue of Mr. George Bartholomew. And I want to talk about I call it his gamble, where he put down some money to warranty the street back in 1891, that it would last at least 5 years. And so there's the street. You can kind of see it's still there. It's been patched quite a bit, but the city is really proud of it, and they've kept the original pieces as much as they can. So I want to talk about, first of all, who was George W. Bartholomew Jr. This is the picture that the Logan County Historical Society has of him, so it's probably the most accurate. This is one from an article in 1941 in the Nevada State Journal talking about the oldest concrete street in America. Could be the same person. Facebook says this, and they say that, or where I got this picture from, said that this was taken in 1891. Doesn't really look like it, though. But at least that's where I got the idea for the costume. And this is the statue that's out there right now. And some artist got his ideas from probably composite of the first two pictures, probably not the other one. Now, George Bartholomew was born in Connecticut, and actually a couple weeks ago I was at the National Concrete Consortium meeting just a few miles from Bristol, Connecticut. But before I went out there, and I didn't go out there to see anything because I couldn't find anything online that would say that the builder of the first concrete street was born there. But his father was a clockmaker, and he was a famous clockmaker, and this is actually in the Smithsonian. This clock that his father made in around 1820. Anyway, so he went to Germany. George Bartholomew Jr. went to Germany to learn cement making, and then San Antonio. And then I found an article in 1884. This is 2 long columns describing the family reunion of the Bartholomew family in Connecticut. But it says George Bartholomew, by then, 1884, he was a prominent dealer in hardware in Austin, Texas, and that he had written and published a 750-page genealogy of the Bartholomew family. By 1886, just a few years later, he had moved to Bellefontaine, Ohio, to live near what he called almost pure sources of limestone and clay, the main ingredients for the production of cement. And then he founded the Buckeye Portland Cement Company, and he founded the city of Marl City, Ohio, named after the stone that he found there. In 1891, he built the first concrete street. He didn't call it that at the time, but there's a picture of it around, it says 1925. And by 1910, he had moved to Colorado, worked for the Colorado Portland Cement Company, and I imagine that that's from census records or something, just because of the date 1910. And this picture is on display at the Logan County Historical Society. This is a picture in 1939, and if you look, this one and the previous one, this is about the same angle. Off in the distance on the left, you can see the steps going up, and those same steps are there. And you can see in 1939 it had had some patching. So anyway, when he proposed to build this, the city council approved a test section, an 8-foot wide strip of concrete that was placed near the hitching posts by the courthouse or the shops on the other side of the street. And after the success of that test, the council approved building the 4 streets around the courthouse out of concrete, but only if he would put up $5,000 bond to warranty the streets for 5 years. So some of the residents were sure that the concrete pavement would not last 3 days, much less 5 years, under the constant pounding of horses' hoofs and steel wagon wheels. And this article, this is from the Lima, Ohio News in 1983, said that there was a taunts of a daily crowd of hecklers as the workers were building the streets. So here's what it's made of. 2 layers of concrete. The first one, they call it the base course, but it's really the first layer of concrete, 4 inches thick, 1.5 inch maximum size aggregate, and a 0.6 water cement ratio. And then the wearing surface, 2 inches, the top 2 inches, was 1/2 inch max size and 0.45 water cement ratio. And they just put the sand, stone, cement, and water in a pile and mixed it up and then placed it into the forms. And they entrapped about 8% air, and I don't know at that time if they knew. But then in 2018, some petrographic analysis suggested that about half of that, 8%, is entrained size air bubbles. And I thought it was really interesting, their method of curing, they put 2 inches of sand on top of the concrete and kept it wet for a week. And then cores taken probably around the same time as that well, maybe in 1991, they did a lot of studies then, suggested that it had a compressive strength of about 5,000 psi. They built it in 5-foot wide strips, the full length of the block, with tar paper between the strips. And then they cut that into blocks of 5 foot square, no expansion joints. And then they sprinkled it with water and gave it a smooth sidewalk finish with steel trowel. And here you can see the 5-foot strips. You can see at least that one longitudinal joint where the tar paper was placed between the strips has been mostly replaced. But again, the city is very proud of this street, and they're not going to take it out, because they did. All 4 of the blocks around the courthouse were paved in concrete, and I think that I don't know when they replaced the others, but they realized that they had something here. They had a gold mine of tourism to come to the concrete street. Workers earned $1.25 a day back then. The total cost of the 4 blocks around the courthouse was about $9,000, and that was less than the cost of brick. In the end, the unit cost was about $2.25 per square yard. And over the next 50 years, maintenance and patching cost a total of $1,400. So he put up a $5,000 bond. The city council required him to put up a $5,000 bond to warranty for 5 years, and then they only spent $1,400 in 50. So he got a lot of awards and recognition. He was honored in 1893 at the World Columbian Exposition in Chicago for first place in engineering technology, advancement in paving materials, and the newspaper article about that said that he was in competition with the biggest producers from Europe. And I don't know, they didn't elaborate on producers of what, but the biggest producers in Europe were there also vying for that prize. And then in 1894, the first gasoline-powered vehicle drove on that street. In 1900, he was granted a patent for an appliance for manufacturing cement. And in 1909, I was at the student reception last night, and they were doing trivia. And one of the questions was, when did ACI start? And they answered 1904. In 1909, in ACI's journal Proceedings, the first time that I could see that it was recognized as the first concrete street. In 1912, he was granted another patent for, quote, certain new and useful improvements in hydraulic cement. Basically, he was grinding up slag and lime, Portland cement, and chlorate of calcium. So I want to talk, the rest of the presentation, I want to talk about the hype, because Bellefontaine is very proud of their street. And these are some of the things that, some of the events surrounding the first concrete street in the US. 1941, they had a golden jubilee. And they really knew how to celebrate a concrete street back then in 1941. They had a historic marker, commemorative ceremonies, speeches. They had a parade and a band contest. They put on a play, a pageant with 300 performers. 30,000 people attended this. And this is in 1941, remember. Ohio's governor showed up, and they had 20 entrants that competed to be crowned the Concrete Queen. And the photo there is the winner of the Concrete Queen contest. And they were also very aware of firsts. And so this vehicle here in the top right is Ohio's oldest registered automobile riding smoothly over the nation's oldest concrete pavement. That's a 1904 Cadillac, single-cylinder chain drive. Also in 1941, they placed this marker, which is still there, this monument made of Atlas white cement and Georgia white marble. And they put a time capsule inside. They put this is a replacement for the marker that they put in 1941. 1962, they did some repairs to the street, but of course you had to rededicate. And Concrete Queen, this is Miss Concrete Pavement, and she went on to represent Logan County in the Miss Ohio pageant. They had a parade with the concrete mixer. And these guys, apparently, from the article, they were just riding in the trailer on the float, just mixing concrete during the parade. And there she is, Miss Concrete Street 1962, riding in the parade. And then they had a ceremony where this guy here is sprinkling some sand and cement on the street, and then she smashed a bottle of champagne on it to rededicate. But the parade was 2 hours long. 3,500 participants in the parade. And it was attended by a 94-year-old worker from the original 1891 construction. They made commemorative plates. This one sold on eBay I found it just before I started looking at this sort of thing, $7.95 on eBay. But I did do some things. The postcard that I showed earlier, I bought this off of eBay for a few dollars. I bought my own tiny piece of the first concrete street on eBay for about $10 or $15. And it came with a certificate of authenticity. They put up a sign saying the first concrete street. And then that sign is now in the County Historical Society with a whole display on, you kind of see there in the picture, on the left, there's a bunch of pictures and information about the oldest concrete street. But Bellefontaine also has the shortest street in America. And so there's some information about that there also. And I went to see that and took pictures. It's 16 feet long. In 1976, the American Society of Civil Engineers came around and made it a National Historic Civil Engineering Landmark, the first concrete pavement. For the 100th anniversary, they still knew how to throw a party for a concrete pavement. They had politicians, they had a parade, they had dinner for 300. Marlon Knutson from ACPA showed up and made a speech. They sold paperweights. This is the paperweight that Luke. This is the piece of concrete that you loaned to me, and I promise I'll send it back to you. If anybody wants to come see this afterwards. They auctioned off pieces of the original street. They placed the statue, George Bartholomew. There was no concrete queen, however. We had kind of lost some of our knowledge of how to throw a party for a concrete street. But in the article, there was one woman on the planning committee, and everybody else said, well, we should have a beauty pageant and concrete queen. And she said, no, we're not doing that. So then we get to 2002, the seminal article in Concrete International by Luke and Billy Snell, which kept the hype going and kept the memory of the oldest concrete street going. And they wrote a very nice article in March 2002. Gets us to then the 125th anniversary. Now we had really lost it. There was no Concrete Queen. There was no band contest, no parades, just speeches and presentations and historical perspectives. However, we had some ACPA representatives. Jerry Voigt was there. Roger Larson from Federal Highways. Politicians. There's Jerry. They cut out a piece of the oldest concrete street, made a award out of it. And this is the program from the conference that they held. Now they did make t-shirts out of that and sold. This is it. I've been looking for one of these on eBay, but this is in the County Historical Society's display. And then at the 2016 conference, Jerry Voigt and others had an idea that we should do a replica of the original test strip, the 8-foot wide test strip. And so 1 year later, they built it, and he coined the famous phrase, "All concrete roads lead to Bellefontaine." Well, everybody's familiar with that. And they did do some interesting things. They brought all of the known descendants that they could find that would come to this ceremony, to the ribbon cutting, and they placed plaques and they made proclamations. And I really like this picture because you have here Jerry Voigt from ACPA, and he's just, in this picture, he's just looking really proud of himself, like, this is really cool. And here you have Nancy Bartholomew, the granddaughter or great-granddaughter, I couldn't quite get the dates figured out right, and she's just looking like, what am I doing here? What is this? But she smiled for the picture. So, in closing, I want to talk about the present day. The First Concrete Street has a TripAdvisor page, 4.2 rating out of 5. It's number 3 out of 18 things to do in Bellefontaine. I don't know. I should have looked to see what the first 2 are. I can't imagine that there's something better than that. It has a Yelp page, Wikipedia, and roadsideamerica.com. If you don't know what roadsideamerica.com, it's an amazing website. It's got thousands of little things like this all over the highways of the United States, things you can go see if you're on a road trip. And somebody, maybe somebody in this room, paid $300 for a piece of the original concrete street. And this is probably one that they sold or made in 1991 at the 100th anniversary. But you could also buy ashtrays. The sign, the first concrete street in America, built here, 1891. And because they're very proud of their street, the street signs, oldest concrete street in America. And every entrance to the city has this sign. First concrete street in America, built here in 1891. So I want to say thanks again to Luke and Billy for their contribution to the information and the history and the construction and the hype surrounding America's first concrete street. So, Luke, I don't have my glasses here, so I can't see. Luke and Billy, thank you for your contributions, and thank you for having lunch with me when I went out there in May. And I guess, are we doing questions? Are we want to wait until the end? Thank you.